And is there anything anybody needs to address before we get started?
Just your microphone. It'd be better if you held it close.
Oh, it's because I was using the other phones. Okay. Anything else besides my microphone before we get going? All right. I think we have public comment, City Clerk, and I know we had some people that signed up ahead of time, but I don't know. I only saw one name. Was that correct, City Clerk?
That's correct, Mayor. And her request was for the agenda item tonight.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure if you were looking at other people that had come in. Okay. Well, then why don't we see if I'm a little bit confused because I see work session, then I see documents to go to documents. Do we need to do anything with those before we go to the public comment on the non-agenda items?
No, Mayor, we are good to go. I just put that notice in there because it was a joint work session with the ad hoc committee. So I only do that when we have to notice the public of a change in the setting for some reason.
All right. Okay, then why don't we go ahead and just go to public comment on the non-agenda items now that I understand this. And for public comment on non-agenda items. I don't see any. I do see one. Public comment on non-agenda items. I'd like to recognize screen name Andrew Joel. Mr. Joel in the meeting. Go ahead. You have the floor. If you're speaking, okay. Nope. We can't hear you.
Hello?
There you go. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Andrew Joel Fonte. I've lived here in this wonderful place for 18 years now. And when I came here, this is involved, by the way, my words, I guess, are I'm making sure I'm going to comment about the right thing, about the necessity of an ad hoc meeting in regards to holding authority figures accountable for their actions. Is this the...
So what you're going to want to do...
What you're going to want to do, Ms. Fonte, is to wait because you want to talk about the item that's for the main meeting tonight, is what I'm hearing from you.
Well, I just want to say that it's necessary, for the continuation. Is there a time that I'm supposed to speak on that or say on that?
Yep, and I'll make sure that you hear when that time is, and it'll be shortly. This is for folks that wanted to talk to us about general items that aren't part of tonight's meeting agenda, but maybe they wanted to talk to us about that are related to the city, but not about the specific items. Right? It's no problem. It's confusing. I'm not really sure why we do it this way. It's just one of the things that we've done for
for a while, and oftentimes people come and they want to talk, and they start talking about our main meeting item. So that'll be coming up. You'll get a shot for that. So just put your hand up again, and we'll make sure that you get a chance to let us know.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
It's not a problem. You betcha.
All right, why don't we see if we've got other comments on the, yeah, I'd like to recognize Melinda Reyes. Thank you for joining us. You've got the floor. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I read the agenda, and hopefully this question isn't too much out of this scope, but I was wondering about the possibility of an ad hoc committee and accountability for the sheriff's office and DCI.
So yeah, this is another comment that's pretty well focused on our main agenda item. Totally legitimate question, but I'm going to have to ask you to please wait and ask it later.
Members of the council,
Absolutely.
see, this is what becomes confusing about having these public comment periods. We try to make it clear that it's the non-agenda items, but I think it's just it's difficult for folks. I see that we've got Councilor Somerville. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. I don't think this is a point of information. I can't hear you very well when you step away from your microphone. I don't know if the public and everybody else is having the same problems. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to illustrate to folks that we apologize for the confusion around the public comment. What we're looking for here right now is comment that is not related to the policing and the ad hoc committee. I don't think we have any. I think we need to get moving so people can get to their, so we can get through the work session and people can get to their comments that they want to share with us that is on topic. So I'm going to keep going. And why don't we go ahead and open up the work session as we had planned. And I will go ahead, I guess. City Manager, we simply, I think, need to introduce our co-chairs for the ad hoc committee. And before I do that, we also want to, as a city council, and on behalf of the staff members that worked with the committee closely, once again, thank the people that dedicated a lot of time to this ad hoc process. It's appreciated. It was probably not the lightest topic to tackle, but we appreciate your dedication to those meetings and your willingness to do the homework, so to speak, outside of those meetings, the extra reading, and come with ideas and a willingness to discuss ideas and dig into this topic, and so that we could try to find a way to move forward as a community. We just really want to express that sentiment and thank you again for that. I know we have many members, if not all the members of that ad hoc committee with us this evening as attendees. So that time and effort was very much appreciated. Our co-chairs for that group elected from among the members of the ad hoc committee were Tracy Rosalind and Mitch Cushman. Tracy is a community volunteer and has done work with the ACOP committee. And Mitch Cushman is a retired many year veteran of the Laramie Police Department, and they co-chaired. And at this point, I think what we'd like to do is turn it over to them to kind of talk a little bit through the process. City Manager?
That's okay, Mayor. I just wanted to let you know I was happy to provide some background leading up to that as well. Should
we go ahead and do that? I wasn't sure how we wanted to approach that, but why don't we have you provide background, City Manager, and then we'll go back and go through co-chair presentations, I guess is how we have this designed. Go ahead.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mayor Weaver. So as noted in the cover sheet materials, Council, many of you will recall we started this dialogue roughly in May and June of 2020. The first resolution of Council being passed in late June, just setting forth some objectives for some additional research that staff would do and come back and present to the Council. That research was presented about 6 months later, roughly a year ago now. And at that point in time, Council were provided a research brief on the use of citizen oversight boards, looking at best practices, strengths and weaknesses of the prevalent models out there, and also were able to discuss this time last year a case study and some citations as well provided to the original sources through the leading national organizations. Your cover sheet does have a clickable link to take you back to, or to take members of the public back to, that presentation provided about a year ago now on February 23rd of 21. As an outcome of that conversation in February of 21, it was further recommended that we put together a knowledgeable panel of residents that could provide some recommendations to city leadership, and that is why we are here tonight. In March 16th of 2021, you all considered that resolution to establish our ad hoc working group for police and community. After the establishment of that committee, we accepted applications in April and May. Many of those applications coming from interested residents of Laramie, just individual folks who wanted to serve in this capacity. We completed the appointment of members to the working group in May, and the working group held its first meeting in late June. This working group met on 15 occasions, starting in late June and concluding on December 16th of 2021. As you directed them to, the working group also hosted 3 public hearings in accordance with the authorizing resolution. As also per council direction, all of the meetings were independently facilitated by a professional team of Ashley Zatruba and Kristen Blankley, both of whom are trained in arbitration and mediation. Just kind of echoing what the mayor said, I participated on this committee, as did a number of members of staff with some 20 other individual residents of Laramie, and it's quite notable the amount of work that these folks do, and I think we have to recognize that. This working group met for about 30 hours, and that's a low estimate. I think it may be a little bit more than that, frankly. And cramming 30 hours into 5 months when you also are busy parents and professionals in our community is not an easy feat. So I wanted to thank them. We've noted the members of the working group, particularly the non-institutional representatives, meaning the people who serve just in their individual capacity as interested and caring residents of Laramie. We noted them in the cover sheet. I'm going to mention them briefly: Josh Brummond, Robin Haas, Joseph Horther, Charles Kassier, Emily Moore, Lisa Rich, and Jeffrey Van Fleet, and then our 2 co-chairs, Tracy Rosenlin and Mitch Cushman, who are going to make the presentation to you this evening. I'll also let you know we did prepare, I don't know if you guys can see this, but we did prepare a certificate of appreciation for all of you, and we'll have those ready here at City Hall before too long. It's very notable when our residents want to get involved in city government. So with that, I would introduce Tracy and Mitch. They're both on the panel this evening, and there are many members as well attending in the attendee section of our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, for that introduction. I also want to add, too, that 30 hours that the City Manager mentions doesn't, I don't think, include the work for the reading and things that we ask people to do outside of that. So, again, we really can't emphasize how much appreciation and thanks we have for the process. We really, really count on citizens to step up sometimes when we have these types of community conversations. Anyway, no more from me. Over to whoever from the co-chairs wants to start off.
I'm certainly willing to start, Mitch, if that's all right with you.
That's fine with me, Tracy. Have at it.
Okay. Well, Janine did a lot of the background for us, so I won't take any more time focusing on that. Just wanted to note that in the original resolution, we were only required to meet once a month, and after Mitch and I were elected in August, we recognized after meeting with the facilitators that probably wasn't going to allow us enough time to get what we wanted done. So we went ahead and increased the meeting frequency to about every 2 weeks. And I think Janine, like I said, did a good job summarizing the rest of them, and so I was just going to go through and read the recommendations. I'll go through half and Mitch will go through the other half. Our first 2 recommendations deal with mental health response, and that had been identified as something that we would like to see addressed with policing in our community. So recommendation 1 states that the City Council should implement a response model by mental health professionals for the Laramie Police Department with the ability to consult with the Albany County Mental Health Board on this endeavor. The city should support a collaborative effort with the county on mental health responses as well. This one was really focused on the city of Laramie and how we could do that, but also recognizing that we have different jurisdictions that have policing services within the city limits. Recommendation number 2 states that the City Council should prioritize work on mental health response opportunities for the Laramie Police Department, and these efforts should involve data collection and program evaluation as allowed by the law. The City Council should explore partnering with the University of Wyoming to do that data collection and program evaluation. And we included the data collection and program evaluation part because we anticipate that you will want to set some, if this recommendation is adopted, that you'll want to set some goals that could be achieved. And so also figuring out how to gather the data that supports the efforts that are being taken in that time. Recommendation number 3 was the recommendation where we were the most split on that. And in my interpretation, and I spoke with Mitch about this prior to the meeting as well, was that part of that was due to our limited time frame. 6 months was really a difficult time frame to work within, and there was a lot that we were looking to cover in it. And with civilian oversight boards and how they can function and everything like that, we didn't feel we were able to investigate long enough and learn long enough about them. And so I think that created this split in that recommendation. But that recommendation says the City Council and City Manager's Office should consult with NACOL to investigate the creation of a civilian oversight board that could function under Wyoming state statute and the International City Managers Association guidelines. Mitch, if you have anything to add that I missed, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for the last 3.
I'll go ahead and save my comments till at the end, I think. So as first of all, I want to thank the City Council for allowing us to be part of this. I know that I was especially blessed with the fact that I got to meet a lot of dedicated young professionals like Tracy, the co-chair, and like others that were on our working group. And I appreciate that the working group are listening to some of these words because I'm sure they're here to see how this is going to work out. And I also appreciate all the citizens that are here that are interested in this, because it makes me feel good that there's a lot of people that really care about Laramie, and a lot of us have dedicated a lot of our professional lives and our personal time to make sure that Laramie is as best as it could. And I think this was a good example of how citizens came together to try to come up with these recommendations. And so I appreciate the fact that City Council was able to do this, and I certainly had a wonderful time meeting the people that were part of this. So I appreciate that. So as we go through recommendation 4, the City Council, I think that during the course of our meeting time, we started to realize is that the Laramie Police Department had been doing things that no one knew about, and I think that there was an idea that they certainly needed to be a little bit more transparent, and I think that they have been doing things in the public eye, but I don't think that people knew where to look or what to see. And so there are certain things that came up in these last couple things that had to do with the transparency of the Laramie Police Department. And recommendation 4 is one of those. That one says that the city council should investigate in creation of a police and community committee to serve as a volunteer group to build a more effective partnership between the Laramie Police Department and the community, specifically looking at increasing transparency of department's activities. Membership on the committee would include formerly incarcerated individuals and individuals from underserved or otherwise disadvantaged groups from within the city. The city council should collect data to evaluate any program instituted under this recommendation. So there was a couple of things in this that was kind of important. One was that we wanted to make sure this was more of an advisory board. It kind of follows a model that Cheyenne Police Department is doing over there. And that model was one of advisements rather than overview, at least for this particular recommendation. And we wanted to include as many different citizens as we possibly could, and especially ones that have had experience with the Laramie Police Department, both good and bad. And so I think that it's kind of imperative that we look at everybody that has had contacts with the city of Laramie Police Department and get their opinions. And we're hoping that by using their opinions, it makes sure that the Laramie Police Department can go ahead and direct their information releases if it's in social media or other things. But that's the intent behind the recommendation 4. And as you can see, that passed almost unanimous with one abstention, which I think was done by a city employee because they wanted to stay out of that for professional reasons. Recommendation 5, the city council should investigate the creation of the Citizens Academy, and the city council should collect data to evaluate any program instituted under this recommendation. You'll see that there was some that voted against this. And I think the reason why they did is that they started to realize is that the city of Laramie Police Department was undermanned at the time, and they thought that there would be an increase of responsibility that wouldn't be law enforcement related, and they thought that that might be an undue pressure on them. But I think this is another attempt at the trying to be as transparent as possible, and what better way than to find out by actually being trained similar to police officers by other police officers, so you know exactly what they go through. And I think that was the intent behind the Citizens Academy recommendation. The last one was recommendation 6. The city council should investigate a complaint process that allows citizens to file complaints outside of the Laramie Police Department. I think that what this was for, there is an anonymous format to go through, but I don't think that people really realize that it was an anonymous way to do it. And I also think that they wanted to make sure that they wanted to stay as far away from the police department as possible. So they wanted to have another access point that they could go through that has nothing to do with the Laramie Police Department. And I think that's what that recommendation was. I think that we also have to realize that this recommendation wasn't really discussed very thoroughly. It kind of came in on the last 10 minutes of the last meeting. And so we really didn't get a chance to discuss the how it was going to be implemented, where it was going to be implemented, or how the citizens would be notified of it and of its presence. And so those are things that we probably should have talked about prior to this, but we thought it was a good idea to begin with, and so that's the reason why it was passed, and that's the reason why it's our recommendation to you to look into that to see how it could be done. Anyway, those are the recommendations that the ad hoc committee come up with after all the information that was gathered. I think that there was some issues that had to do with how it was run, probably not necessarily on a moderator's part, but more of discovery as we went through. And if you're interested in those opinions, I think that I'm willing to give them. And but right now, those are the opinions and the recommendations of the working group, and I'll stop there until asked.
I appreciate that very much from the co-chairs. Co-Chair Rosalind, did you have anything you wanted to add on that part of the discussion? I think what I might do is see if there are other ad hoc committee members that want to provide a little bit of feedback next in the process. But I'll go to you, Co-Chair Rosalind, and see if there's anything you want to add before I do that.
I don't have anything to add. I certainly have thoughts on if you'd like to hear about the process as well from us. So.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to have time for that. I think that's going to be one of the focuses of the meeting, along with some other topics. Co-Chair Cushman, do you have anything else you want to tack on there before we see if there's anybody from the committee that wants to share a thought or two with us?
No, I certainly would yield to anybody on the committee. I think they did a great job, and a lot of times, you only hear what we've recommended, but there are a lot of people that did a really good job in participating and really helped direct a lot of these things. I'd like to hear from them as well.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I think folks did a good job of agreeing and disagreeing throughout. It certainly wasn't a process where on every single discussion there was consensus, but we managed to have those discussions on a regular basis and still come back to the next meeting and keep working on it. So if there's anybody from the ad hoc committee that wants to add to this report piece, here's an opportunity for you. You don't certainly not required to do that by any means, but if you'd like to, I want to give you an opportunity to do that now before we go to the next part of the discussion. Yes, I'd like to recognize Charles Kassir, Dr. Kassir. Let's let him into the meeting and go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I wanted to say that I feel a couple of things about the process, and I know that's not the first topic, but that it was frustrating for many of us at first that it went so slowly, that it seemed like it took a long time for us to actually get into the meat of the discussion, and then we had to sort of hurry at the end to come up with recommendations. But I do also feel that with such a large and varied group of people, getting this amount of work done in this short a time is hard, and especially over Zoom. I mean, to try to actually interact well with 20-something people over Zoom and work is difficult. So that one of the things that we talked about repeatedly that isn't necessarily mentioned directly in these recommendations is that the need for when something is going to go forward, you're going to need working groups that are smaller and more focused to actually get those things done. This group just was not the one that was able in its current structure to actually design any of these particular things that would have to be done in the future. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think that's a pretty fair and balanced assessment of that process. Let's see if we have other comments. I'll tell you what, we'll move forward with a little bit more discussion, and we'll periodically check back and see if there are members of the ad hoc committee that want to add to a particular piece of the discussion that we're involved with, and then before too long here, we'll go for public comment, public feedback on it. Council members, any questions about this sort of general overview or components of the process about this so far? I'll note that Mr. Cushman had emailed and said, I'm not sure what all we want to cover tonight, and mentioned, of course, the fact that 3 council members have been on the committee as well. And this is completely fine. We more or less just gave updates about, the ad hoc committee had met, and we're continuing to work through it. We've mentioned if we had an outside presenter come in. For instance, we had a discussion with former Cheyenne Police Chief Kozak, and we said, he came in and talked to the group and helped us ask questions, but we did not go into a detailed reporting about our meetings with the council at any point, because we knew that there would be an opportunity for us to have a longer discussion about it like we are this evening.
Okay.
And that was fine to kind of raise that question, Mr. Chrisman. I think makes sense. One thing that we haven't really talked about were the public forum pieces to this. Did we have 3 of those? Yeah. Do either of you want to touch a little bit on that? Maybe that seems like an important thing to cover. I guess I can.
I can kind of weigh in on that a little bit. I didn't know how that was going to go with Zoom. I've always been involved in face-to-face types of conversations, and I thought that Zoom would be one that would be a little bit more hindering and maybe a little bit exclusive if you didn't have computer access. And so I was always a little on the hesitant side. However, I was really pleasantly surprised by some of the people that called in. Some people were actually the people that we were looking to hear from, and they were brave enough to go ahead and come on our Zoom and make comments. And I certainly appreciate their wanting to do that. I thought that was something that was very rare to see, people that may have actually had contacts with us, and some may have had mental health issues that were willing to talk publicly on it. And I was really impressed with some of their comments, and I thought that they were helpful. We also had a person that was actually kind of a counselor there, and she actually started to do questionnaires with some of the people that she worked with, and I really appreciated that too, as part of a professional response to our open comments as well. And I really appreciated the fact that she was willing to go a little extra work and time with that, and she gave us some replies to what some of her clients were telling us, and I think that was also very helpful.
And I was pleased with the turnouts for the community forums as well. I wasn't quite sure, and it wasn't specifically stipulated in the resolution for how those would be held. And we ended up doing 3 in 1 week and staggered them at different times throughout the day to try to give the opportunity to multiple people to attend. And we even held one on Saturday. And so, we are appreciative of the city staff who worked on a Saturday to help facilitate that meeting. And I thought the feedback that we gathered was important as well, and very valuable. Hearing from the city of Laramie citizens of their thoughts on mental health responses and oversight, a potential oversight board for here as well. Originally, I had envisioned that those community forums would take place over a longer period of time, maybe more intermittently throughout the process. And I wonder if for any future endeavors similar to this, that it might be helpful to get the community's feedback on topics as we're discussing them. Because we put out working group memories that summarized our topics, and so we were able to package them in separate topics essentially. And so I think once we finished with one segment, it could have been ideal to then have a community forum soliciting feedback from residents regarding those specifically at that time. And I think that could have helped better inform our recommendations that we developed if it had been more of a process that happened as our discussions were happening.
Thank you. Thank you for those overviews. Councilor Gabriel, I know you had raised your hand, but I see that Chief Stalder maybe wants to add a comment here. And of course, he was on that committee with us. So I'd like to.
Yeah, Mayor, as a member of the council, I attended all 3 community forums and then tracked attendees and those who made comments. If council's interested in that, I can certainly provide that information. There were a total of 11 people in 3 community forums who spoke, and some of those were repeat speakers, but I would be glad to provide that for council in context. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief Stalder. Councilmember Gabriel, I saw you had raised your hand a little bit ago. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I wanted to go back to the point that Mitch talked about, and he mentioned that the committee didn't have a very long chance to really discuss it, but it seems to be a very important component of all of this, and that was the citizens' complaint process, how that might work, the intimidation factor of somebody filing a complaint against the police department is certainly very uncomfortable for people. And you talked about it being brought up at the very end. Have you had any thoughts about how that might work and what advice you would give to the city council on how to implement something like that?
Well, that's a very good question, Councilman Gabriel. I think that a lot of us thought that we wanted to start to look at how to implement, but I don't think that we had the time or the information to really get into the nuts and bolts of how that could work. Presently, what we have is that you have an anonymous porthole that people can make a complaint. It is on the city webpage, I believe, but it doesn't look like it's advertised as anonymous. It just said if you want to give name or if you don't, you know, I mean, it's kind of small. I think that if that was publicized better, I think that would serve for at least a portion of this. But that is also on the city site, and that goes directly to the police department after that, I think. And like I say, it isn't publicized well as an anonymous type of reporting. And I think if you were going to do anything, I think that you would have to make sure it's advertised. I think you would have to make sure that people knew where it was. And from what that recommendation 6 was saying is that it looks like it shouldn't have anything to do with the police department until it probably goes through another source first, whether it's city manager, whether it's a city council person, whether it's somebody that is coming through a collection site. So it's going to have to be something like that in order for that recommendation to be fulfilled, I think.
Great. Thank you.
And may I add a little, Mitch?
Sure.
Okay. And Councilor Gabriel, we were able to discuss the complaint process a couple of times during our meetings, so we became familiar with it. And what Mitch was talking about was the submission form on the City of Laramie's website. And after our discussions leading up to the working group, the City of Laramie changed that form to no longer require a name. You can submit the complaint without your name, but I think the field, like many online forms, the required fields are indicated with an asterisk or something similar, and I think that's all the difference is. So it isn't too clear for anybody who may be looking at that. And I can certainly only speak for myself, and I do wish we had time to discuss developing the language for that complaint process further. In my head, I envisioned an entity outside of the city that would receive these complaints and be able to communicate the information that was shared with them to the police department for their internal investigation, as well as the city manager if necessary. And then also, I think the other portion that's missing in the complaint process is the feedback that regarding the outcome of the internal investigation to the complainant. And so I think that would be an important piece to add to it as well, to have it be a whole cycle. So, submit the complaint, it's given to the proper people to investigate, the investigation is completed, the determination is made, the determination is shared with this outside entity that handles these complaints, who can then relay that information back to the complainant. It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that as of now, when a complaint is filed, once a determination has been made, I think that's the end of it, and that no feedback is given to the person who filed the complaint. Thanks, Chief Stalder. Hopefully he can elaborate. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, Mayor,
Yep.
Mayor and council and members of the audience, our complaint handling procedure actually specifies that we will always respond to the person who made a complaint with the outcome. We won't tell them personnel matters that are involved in that complaint, but we'll certainly tell them whether that complaint was substantiated, unsubstantiated, unfounded, or founded. So we provide them with that, but we won't reveal personnel matters if there's a disciplinary action involved just because of personnel records. But that's in our complaint handling general order.
And Mayor, I would just notice that the city manager sent out a link to the complaint portal that was sent to all council members. So I'll take a look at that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. City Manager, I note that you might want to add. Nope, nothing else to add here. Okay. I think a little bit of this discussion speaks to Mr. Cushman's point about the lack of awareness about some of these processes and some of the details of them that he mentioned earlier in his comments about some of these things not being well understood. And that is probably not a good thing. In fact, I think we can say confidently that it isn't. And that's part of what we look at is making sure people understand how these things work and what is available. Chief Stalder, I see you still have your hand raised. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that or if you just haven't had a chance.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I just guess I want to add one thing to your final comment there, is that when we developed about 4 to 6 months ago our anonymous portal for filing complaints, which is truly anonymous, and Councilor O'Doherty tested it to that fact. At that link, we also have our complaint handling general orders, so people can go there and learn about that general order and how complaints are handled through the police department. So, Mayor, to your point, people can certainly access the complaint handling order and see how that process works. Thank you.
Not a problem. One thing that I can't remember immediately here is if the email form or the electronic form was the only way to complete the report. I don't know if there was an in-person process or if this was a process where someone could call in. Were either of those? I think there was certainly an option to go in and fill a complaint out, but I don't know if there was an option to call. And if
Mayor,
yeah,
Mayor, we've had the full spectrum for the majority of my career, where people can come in and file a complaint either anonymously or by name. They can submit that through our portal. They can call dispatch and make a complaint, and that's assigned to a sergeant who may pass it to a lieutenant or up the chain of command. So all those options exist and have for at least the last 25 years.
All right, thank you, Chief. Mr. Cushman, you got a hand up?
Yes, I think that Chief Staller's comment is pretty accurate, is that these things have been always a passive type of information that you could get if you happen to open these up. And I think that that's really what one of the things is that the community is interested in, is more of a non-passive approach to try to get information out there, so that even if you don't have to ever use a complaint, you know that it's there. And I think that that's one of the things that would be, I think, is what the community is really looking for, is more billboard signs rather than calling some number and finding out what you're supposed to get for it. So I think that that's really what the object is try to be a little bit more proactive, to try to get it to people that may never need the information, but certainly know that the police department is providing it whether you need it or not. So that's all.
Thank you. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to note on the complaint process, I don't want it to be lost for the residents that I also field complaints through my office. I'd say semi-frequently, probably at least a handful of times each year, which I'll work with the chief on, and through the processes that they have in place in the order that he mentioned earlier. So recently, I literally just fielded a complaint in my office probably 3 months ago. And so I want to put that out there so people understand that they don't necessarily have to go to the police department to initiate those kinds of concerns to the attention of folks here at the city.
Thank you. I'd like to ask and see if we have any ad hoc committee members that want to add anything to this part of the discussion regarding that recommendation about the complaint process. Again, that's just to give people an opportunity to do so. They may not. Council, any follow-up questions about this? Councilmember Schuster, and I'll go to Councilmember O'Doherty.
Thank you very much. Now, this one isn't about this subject. We had the one caller that called in that asked about if maybe, and I would like to see our results given to the Sheriff's Department, the University of Wyoming Police Department. DCI, I think, feels going to be a tough one because they're state ran, and we're not going to have any jurisdiction over them. But I'd like to see the university and the Sheriff's Department get copies of this, because I know that the Board of Trustees would have to make that final decision for the university, and the county commissioners would have to make the final decision for them, because we had the one caller that asked about that. So I think that hopefully our results will go to them too. And if that caller feels that it's really, really important, I hope that they go to some county commissioners meetings. And I don't know when the university trustees meet. That one would be tough, I think, to present to them. But thank you. I didn't mean to change the subject too early, but I remembered the other person calling in on that, and they haven't spoke again, so I thought I'd bring it up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster, and they're going to get an opportunity to speak to that in just a moment. I want to make sure that I understand what you mean when you say results. You mean the ad hoc committee process? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about our 6 topics that will be presented to City Council. Okay. I hope that they get the same 6 topics, because not everything happens at the city. I tell my students that when they come to Laramie and go to school here, there are 5 law enforcement agencies, not just one in the city, because Game and Fish have complete jurisdiction too. Highway Patrol have jurisdiction over entire Albany and the state. And then we come into our Sheriff's Department, our UWPD, and last but Laramie Police Department. So, I mean, there are 5 different law enforcements here. I think the big 3 are the ones we're kind of talking about. which would be the UW, the city, and the sheriff's department. So, but yeah, I'd like to see those too, because not everybody's had a few problems in their life, everybody. And I'd just like to see that they mirror what's going on here. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to be 100% clear on that. Mr. Cushman, did you want to add to that particular comment? I saw you had a hand up.
Just a little bit. I appreciate your comments there, Councilman Schuster. Exactly what I was going to say is that, and we had to go through a little bit of that with our working group as well, is that when people get contacted, all they see is a person in uniform, and they don't see the different color of uniforms. They don't see the different types of cars. Sometimes they just know it was in Laramie, so it must be Laramie PD. But you're exactly right. The highway patrol can work on Grand and 3rd Street as part of their jurisdiction. Those are all highways and business loops for I-80. And then you have the University Police Department, who I believe had a member of the working group that was certainly, I think that they were supposed to be just participants, but not voting participants. So I think that they were aware of the things that were going on here. And of course, the Sheriff's Department would certainly, if they want to. Now, we always offer, but sometimes we don't get anyone that wants to participate with us. And so it's one of those things that I think that it's important that people are aware that there are 5 different agencies in town, and that depending on who contacts them, the only control that the city council has is over the city of Laramie Police Department. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor O'Doherty.
Yeah, the issue with the complaint system now is that, it's not obvious that you can do it anonymously, and you don't know. And when you're specifying the time and the place, then you kind of lose anonymity there. So, and then we can't get back to the person if they stayed anonymous on that form. So I like the idea of having a separate system, but I also know that citizens contact counselors, because I hear it, and so if I get a complaint and I mention it to the police chief, he looks into it. So I want the public to know that they have, between the city manager, they also have 9 city councilors that they could tell about a problem if they're trying to stay anonymous. But there is the problem of, without that specificity, it's hard for the police chief to understand, was this really one of his officers that did something, or was it one of those other 5 departments? So it's a double-edged sword. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Why don't we see if there's some public input about this recommendation surrounding the complaint process. I've got a hand up from Mr. Fonte, Andrew Joel Fonte. And so let's give him an opportunity. Go ahead. And Mr. Fonte, I think I want to apologize for confusion earlier about.
No reason. I'm understanding. I just want to say something real quick, Mayor and Council, and regarding to the, just so everybody knows how well this reporting system that they're going on about. 10 years ago, this all started because I reported to Janine Jordan what they were doing with their cameras. I wouldn't even be involved if it was 10 years ago, if she would have taken what she said now, that she cares, she does it right, she does all these things. Let me tell you, this was her response. She called the police on me. That was her response. Talk about anonymous, right? She called the police, and Bob Whitman, or Bob Southern, he was there, and I walked out with Bob Southern, because Bob was able to tell that policeman that there was no reason to be around. So if there was something working there, I think I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be playing with my kids right now and getting ready for tomorrow's schooling. So I just wanted to comment on that, and I'll take my other comments when everybody else does. Thank you so much for answering my hand there. Thank you.
All right. You know, this is a tough topic, and we know that people have some strong feelings about it. I would ask people to try to focus their comments on policies and policies under consideration, and try to gear most of the comment towards policy consideration. We've got another hand up, which is from Melinda Reyes, and I'd like to recognize Melinda Reyes and provide an opportunity to speak. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm really nervous. This is my first meeting of this sort. And thank you, Councilman Schumer, for hearing me and addressing my question, which was about the Sheriff's Office and DCI. And I get nervous just even talking about it, so my voice is shaking. I do understand, and like I said, that's why I asked the question at the beginning of the meeting, because it's a little bit out of scope. I know this is about the Laramie Police Department. I want to thank ACOP and this whole ad hoc committee for just, you know, even small steps forward are forward. And it's, I think, important just to address that there is a situation, and, you know, so that the public and the community has the opportunity to be heard. My situation is unfortunately to do with DCI and the Sheriff's Office. I feel like the Laramie Police Department is doing better with the body cams that they're required to wear. DCI is not required to wear a body cams, and the only complaint process that I am aware of that you can make with DCI is to post, which I made a couple different complaints to them, and I tried to get it on record, like through email, for, you know, accountability and transparency purposes, you know, so that they would just address my questions on the record. And they pulled me aside off the record into the Sheriff's Office, and basically said that my concerns were unfounded. But even if they were unfounded, you know, I just feel like they could have, you know, taken accountability in saying why they were unfounded on the record. And same with the Sheriff's Office. You know, unfortunately, they were kind of involved with my whole situation. That's still ongoing and in the appeal process right now. And there was just a lot of things that that were concealed from the record. And then I get told that I need to go to my appellate counsel and then speak with them and that these are concerns with the Supreme Court. But if anybody knows about the criminal justice system, which I am learning, is that anything that's not in the trial, anything that's concealed from the trial, you're unable to bring it up in the appeal court. So all of these things, you know, that I asked for, exculpatory record, body cams, all that, there's no accountability and transparency through DCI or the Sheriff's Office. And but I think that this group and the opportunity, this group and the publicity and everything, I mean, I'm just hoping that since LPD is kind of stepping up and, you know, wearing the body cams and trying to make a better public image, that I'm hoping that the Sheriff's Office and maybe DCI would, you know, be encouraged through that, or that, you know, just through the public awareness that there is a problem with accountability and transparency in the Albany County justice system, that they might step up on their own, hopefully. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to share your views. That goes to everyone. We have Linda Devine that's raised a hand. I'd like to recognize Linda Devine. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, this is strictly regarding the complaint process. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I actually think that we do need a complaint process outside of the law enforcement as well as the city manager. I think sometimes there's just way too much conflict, which brings us back to what we originally were all wanting to do, a citizen oversight board. But I think when you have the fox guarding the hen house, sometimes we just run into some challenging situations. I would encourage you to consider having some kind of a complaint process. And I know that, they say that it's anonymous, but I think sometimes folks also want a place to be able to go to and get feedback on what's happening with their complaint, because they make a complaint and they never hear back. And then it goes back to, well, it's, it's private. If there's a discipline, we can't give that information. And I think that folks need to have an avenue to voice their concerns, know that they're being heard, and then get some type of feedback on what happened. So I appreciate your time, as well as the ad hoc committee. I know it was a lot of work and time consuming, so I do appreciate their work.
Thank you for those comments and for taking time to come to a meeting and share your views. That goes for all of you here. Do we have any other comments on the complaint process? Okay. Council members, at this point, I would like us to get into some questions or discussion about any of the other recommendations, but I want to focus that on the recommendations regarding the mental health to start with, and there's a reason that I'm requesting that we do that. A lot of the recommendations, well, at least two of these recommendations, pardon me, focus on cooperating with the mental health board and what they are going to do in terms of work, and some ideas that I believe are under consideration for them to put forward. For instance, if you look there at the first recommendation, that the City Council should implement a response model by mental health professionals for the LPD with the ability to consult with the mental health board, and that we should support a collaborative effort with the county on mental health resources. I think that's absolutely a good recommendation and something that we need to do and the way that we need to do it. But you see that a large part of that recommendation comes out of the county's steps that they're taking. And I'm not sure at where they're at in the process. I have some understanding, but it's also my understanding that they're in a period where they're doing some changes to scope of work that they're focusing on, and I think that's important for us to talk about. I don't know that it changes the recommendation, but I think it might impact the timelines for that, or at least that we'll need to wait and see where the mental health board is in some of that work. I hope that seems like a reasonable assessment on my part, but it does seem like something we need to talk about. I had a couple of conversations dealing with specifically with this issue, and so I think it bears some attention from us. Again, I don't think it changes the recommendation, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there's a whole other process around these mental health responses and how we might work together and integrate those. And a lot of that isn't under the city council's control or jurisdiction, or however you'd like to describe it. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I would like some more ideas about the data collection. One of the things that I wonder is when someone calls in emergency, how it's heard by the folks taking the call, and then how they would know what's the appropriate, is this a mental health thing, or is this, like a assault or something like that. Like, one of the statistics I'd be interested in is how often they resolve in the same way that the dispatcher thought that, they thought they were calling because somebody is shaking my gate trying to get into my house. But the responders see, it's somebody that we know has some issues. And so I was just wondering, that's one of the kinds of statistics I think would be helpful to know, is how we can respond properly. And I was just wondering if especially Ms. Rosalind, if she had something in mind there, I think, or Councilor Cumby. Thank you.
Okay. No, I that's where we want to go with this. I do see that that we've got a hand up from one of our ad hoc members that I think probably has some input for us on this. So I'd like to go to Claire White, and thank you for being here. And go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of comments that have been made throughout the conversation. For those of you, I'm a professor at the university in the Department of Criminal Justice, and have actually done research on mental health responses by law enforcement for some time. So Councilman O'Doherty, how do you say your name? O'Doherty.
O'Doherty. And on that topic, I'm sorry, I should have introduced you as Dr. White, because of course this is an area where you're a researcher, and I apologize. Go ahead.
That's all right. There is no perfect response to your question, but trying to understand, what different jurisdictions are doing and partnering mental health officers with police, or mental health professionals with officers. And as Chief Stalder would be able to speak to, if dispatchers are often trained in crisis intervention, so there should be some level of training, but it can always be improved to kind of diagnose those calls early on to send the appropriate response. And then also the overlap with the Albany County Mental Health Board was largely because we've started working on these areas for about a year now. So to us, it was kind of this, things were already in motion. We are going to be collecting data from Ivinson Hospital and the Laramie PD. So we felt recommendations should take that into account. So we're not starting the wheel over and redoing work that we've already begun. So that's why we incorporated that mental health board, was some things are already in motion that we didn't want to have to redo.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a follow-up, since you're serving on the Albany County Mental Health Board currently, is that correct, Dr. White?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you see any issue with the way we have put forward that recommendation to do just that, which is to cooperate and see if, working with Albany County Mental Health Board, we can work towards those integrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's nice about these discussions is these are changes that are happening all over the country, and you kind of have to start where we're at, right? So if right now it's Laramie PD, but over time we can bring in the sheriffs and these other, agencies. But what we want to look at is kind of what the scope of the problem is, how many people are coming into contact with police that have a mental health problem, and are there better response options available in the community, or can we build with what we already have, that being more follow-up on the back end rather than maybe that initial response. But we're really trying to take a data-driven approach and see what the police data and the hospital data tells us from an initial starting point. And then we've been working, looking at Fort Collins. They have a really developed co-responder model that they've been kind of informing us about their process and what they've developed there. Because again, this is all over the country, agencies are developing or having these discussions.
Thank you, and I apologize, but I want to get to this particular question. Is do you see this recommendation as being one
yes.
that fits in with that effort?
Yes, yes.
All right, I appreciate that. Mr. Cushman.
This is just to help Councilor O'Doherty understand how dispatch works sometimes, and certainly Chief Stolder can come in on this too if I say something wrong. But generally speaking, dispatchers receive a call, and it might be a call, say a call for service like someone's breaking into my garage or something like that. That would be the heading that would be on the report in dispatch, and it wouldn't be until later that when an officer responds that he realizes this person is transient, he has mental health issues, and so it wouldn't be until after the response and contact that they would actually try to change that out. So sometimes it doesn't work out that way. You still get the initial response about breaking and entering, but and you won't find that unless there was like an involuntary committal or something like that happened during the investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Chief Stolder, so you got a hand up there, and I'd like you to add whatever you're planning on, and also if you could just touch on that issue of if you see this fitting in with those efforts, because my understanding is you're also serving on that mental health board, so if you could touch on that as well too, I think council would appreciate it.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, one of the things that's happened since Mitch's departure, I don't know, 8-9 years ago now, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more, is that in addition to our CIT program for police officers, which has been in place since 2007, and I'd give Mitch credit for bringing that to the forefront, is over the last 5 years, we've had CIT for dispatch personnel, and we have 5 out of our 10 dispatchers trained in CIT for dispatch. So the triage of those calls is done by the dispatcher and then move forward.
Could you break down that acronym for everyone? The CIT. I think you're talking about critical incident training. Is that right?
It's crisis intervention teams.
Crisis intervention.
Crisis intervention team. So CIT. I apologize for that. I think everybody knows our acronyms, but it's crisis intervention team, which we've had in place for many years, since 2007. So there is a component of that now for dispatchers that is utilized by about half of our dispatch force, which is actually above the recommended standard by ISCP for your sworn force, which is 20%. So we keep trying to lead in this, but there's a triage of those calls, like Councilor Doherty said, to try to make a determination if there's mental illness or crisis involved on the response.
And do you see these recommendations as being able to fit in with continuing work there with the Albany County Mental Health Board?
Mayor and Council, I believe that the recommendations made on the mental health side are absolutely in line with what we've been doing, not just for the last year with the Mental Health Board and the subcommittee for the alternative response, but that the Laramie Police Department's been trying to do since 2008, 2007, and even beyond that. So I have no problem at all with those.
Thank you. Dr. White, I see that you're still with us, and that's fine. And I may ask you to just stay with us as a panelist for just a little bit longer. But I do want to go to other public comment from attendees, and I see that we've got a hand up from Sarah. And I apologize if I get the last name wrong, Bursick, and I'd like to recognize Sarah and give her the floor.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. One thing I just wanted to add to the conversation was the rollout of 988 that's happening this summer. I think mid-July is the national deadline for when the new dispatch line 988 is going to go active, and that is intended to capture calls coming in regards to mental health or substance use crises. That's a national deadline, and I have been in contact with the governor's office to know that the state is having its own planning to roll out the implementation of 988. So I think it's very timely that the city of Laramie is looking at these recommendations, and I would be curious to hear how the city council might consider dovetailing the possibility of developing a mental health crisis response with the already, the planned rollout of implementing 988. And I don't know what that might be looking like already on a city level and if there's been plans for that. But just to know that there's some coordinated effort already happening on that. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's 100% relevant to this part of the discussion. Is there anybody that wants to address some of that? Yes, Councilor Somerville.
Thanks, Mayor. I can address a little bit of that. I'm part of the statewide planning effort for 988. So I would just say that Ms. Bursack was absolutely correct. Wyoming will come online with 988, but I want to be clear that right now it's envisioned to be a separate dispatch center through a separate call center. The conversations with how to dovetail that with law enforcement and work that together are happening on a state level right now, not so much a local level yet, as the state moves through a lot of the technical details for that. But of course, it will bring a new type of response, certainly a new phone number for crisis. So I think it's something, from my perspective as a city council member, we'll want to continue to watch and pay attention to as that statewide plan moves forward, and look at any local dovetailing that comes out from that per se.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments or questions around this, these recommendations of the mental health and these future changes for mental health response? I think this is a really critical piece of these recommendations and also the direction that we're going for these responses. So I think it warrants as much discussion towards understanding about what's coming as we can get. Linda Devine, let's recognize Linda Devine for this topic. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I'm also on the Albany County Mental Health Board, and last week, Chief Stalder and I were both on the phone with Commissioner Gozar, and I know that one of the things that he was talking to us about was trying to get the city more on board with us. I know that Councilor Cumby has appeared in some of the different meetings, so I think it's something that we would really encourage and work with the city to try to coordinate some efforts there.
Thank you. I guess I would ask you that question about, do you see this as these recommendations as fitting in with that effort and helping move it forward?
Not only fitting, but I think it's necessary. It's critical. Thank you.
Are there other comments on this topic with the mental health recommendations? Again, I don't think we can overemphasize how important that is right now. And where it's, Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, I really want to acknowledge the work that LPD has done to date with mental health. I think in a lot of ways, what we've seen is they're pretty far ahead of the curve in terms of training and other aspects. And I just wanted to kind of point out the wording of the recommendation there was some discussion about whether we should kind of strap the LPD to only what the Albany County Mental Health Board was doing, or if we should let them go out on their own. And I think it's worth acknowledging that the Albany County Health Board is the PD, the sheriffs, UWPD, and that we wanted to give some room to the chief to move forward and the city to move forward on our own if that's the way that it worked, depending on what the mental health board was doing. I think that cooperation is really, really critical, but we didn't necessarily want to kind of hamstring any efforts we wanted to put in place by having to wait for the mental health board, which is still a relatively new agency. It hasn't been around, gosh, I think but 4 or 5 years, maybe, something along those lines. And certainly is as resource constrained as everybody else. But I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank the group members. There was a lot of really great mental health expertise that brought to the table. And frankly, we probably could have spent a year all on its own just on digging into mental health response with how critical it is. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we wanted that that area. Yes, Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reinforce what Linda Devine said, that the Mental Health Advisory Board that has been working for a year is, I think, an important resource for the city. And I do think it's very important that we see that linkage with the city and the work that this county committee is doing as being advantageous to promoting and supporting this goal. And that maybe we look to more formalize that position on the board as a liaison position from city council. And there's been, in the last couple months, conflict with the vaccination incentive meetings as well, but we are changing those times. And I just want to say, I think it's very important that we formalize that liaison position and that we sustain that over time in a regular basis. And thank you for commenting on that, Linda Devine. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Cumby, and we should note that Councilmember Cumby has a pretty extensive amount of expertise and background in this area as well. And the reason I want to just put so much time into this piece of the discussion is I think those recommendations are really, really critical, and they're part of larger efforts that are ongoing. So as Councilmember Cumby says, that linkage is important. And the other thing I want to make sure that we've addressed tonight is that those recommendations dealing with this policy area conform with what we're doing, and don't create an opportunity for any friction. We want them to be complementary and fitting into that work as we move forward. I think that's the most important piece. So that's the reason for my effort to make sure we spend enough time covering that. I don't want to leave any of those questions unaddressed because they're so important, and there is already so much taking place, and we want to make sure that those fit in. But we'll give it another opportunity. Yes, Councilmember Cumby, I see you've raised your hand again, please.
Thank you. The other thing, and this is more of a general comment, in my work with mental health and crisis response, and also my research with communities, assessing community health and well-being, 2 issues surface constantly that have also been illuminated in our report. And number 1 is the lack of linkage, that sometimes resources exist in a community, but the linkage is lacking. And number 2 is the lack of being able to connect with the community regarding resources and opportunities for voicing concerns, with people being aware of what's there and what they can do. And I have gone into some communities where they thought there was a lack of resource, and actually the real problem was a lack of knowledge in the community that the resource was there, and linkage among the resources. So I think we have really targeted a couple of areas that we could work on creatively.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. And I think that gets us, that gives us a pretty good segue now then to broaden out the discussion and into a couple of the other recommendations. And we can revisit a topic if need be. But the other recommendation that I think we need to have some conversation about is the Citizen Academy discussion. And Mr. Krishma touched on this a little bit, and I think his evaluation of that discussion and the votes against it were absolutely right. I didn't support that recommendation in our group, and my reasoning for that was based on the content of our conversations, which is that there might be some merit to that organization, but there was some discussion around costs and time and what it would require, and Mr. Krishma touched on that, and it seemed like something that, although might be useful, it also seemed to be a recommendation that would increase the burden on LPD and the city's resources to provide it, because it's not just show up for an hour and learn about the police. It's more involved than that, and it seemed to be more resource intensive than that. That said, the recommendation did pass through the group, but those were some of the concerns and the discussion around it. Some of the benefits of it were that it might be useful for people that wanted to learn more about how certain things are approached and handled, and different procedural aspects of the police department, which again I certainly acknowledge has some merit. I don't know if there's any further conversation anybody wants to have about that right now. Yes, Councilmember O'Doherty.
When I first read that, I saw it as like neighborhood watch kind of thing. I really don't want a vigilante system in Laramie. So if that's if that's what was intended, that scares me. I mean, neighborhood watch is one thing. Neighborhood watch where people think that they have, the wherewithal to go around shooting people in the street for, So I'm a little leery of that. So I'd love for somebody to explain it a little better. Thanks.
Fair question, Councilmember O'Doherty. Having been part of the discussion when a lot of that was presented, I didn't really read it as that, but I think it's a reasonable question. I think you could see how someone might wonder if that was what it was. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to add to that. I had the same thought as Councilor O'Doherty. This sort of opportunity to maybe create some sort of vigilante group, even if not the intention, of course. So if two of us thought that, maybe that would be worth drilling deeper into, for sure.
Thanks, Councilmember Harrington. My understanding is the model that was under consideration with the ad hoc committee that did not mirror those concerns. It was more of a learning opportunity type system. But if anybody else wants to speak to that, I think this is, yes, Chief Stalder, this is the time to talk about that.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, the concept of a Citizens Academy is decades old, and many departments have had Citizens Academies in a number of different forums. In 1993-4, when I was in crime prevention, we considered a Citizens Academy. The turnoff, if you will, was the additional work that it placed on officers to come in and teach those classes to a citizens group, as well as the proper screening that would need to take place for those people who would come into academies. So this is not a new concept at all, and it could be done on a variety of scale. It could be a I've discussed with the city manager after the ad hoc committee ended their work that another option versus a citizens academy would be the ability for citizens to come in and observe different trainings that we do, whether it would be custody and control or firearms or taser or sexual assault investigations, where people could audit those classes, which would reduce the amount of overhead involved in setting up an entirely different protocol for citizens. So this is not a new concept, nor one that we're foreign to, but one that frankly would challenge our staffing capability at this time and our the ability to put it all together. But we discussed it and I explained it to the city manager that this could be done in small blocks over a longer period of time and people could attend what they want. So this is not a concept that's problematic for us.
Thank you, Chief Stalder. One aspect of this that I would like us to talk about is that concern that was presented about the potential for additional time involved, and frankly, the lack of availability of people to do it. We did talk just now. We did hear some discussion about scaling it, but I do recall that there was some concern about time and resources and who would be asked to do it if we implemented it. And I don't know who would want to weigh in on that. I think probably, Chief Stalder, that's for you. I think the budgetary concern is there, which is that it's not something that's built into any of our LPD personnel schedule now. It would have to be additional on top of it, regardless of how extensive it was. Is that accurate, Chief?
Mayor and Council, if you did a straight out Citizens Academy, there'd be a lot of overhead to that in overtime and scheduling. But that's why I throw out that concept of training audits, where if people were interested in auditing different aspects of police training, because at least a couple of times a year we're doing in-house training for new recruits. And certainly we could open that up to community members if they were interested, and we could devise a plan to advertise that for people that were interested and eligible to audit those courses. So that would be my suggestion, is an audit process versus a full-out Citizens Academy, or we could scale a Citizens Academy to topics that the community is interested in. But I would reiterate, this is not a new concept, and it's one that the Laramie Police Department has been discussing since the early to mid-90s.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that suggestion makes sense, but I do think it's somewhat different than the recommendation that's been put forward. And that's okay. That's why we're having the work session and the discussion about it. That might be something that could be picked up at and a different plan discussed and put under consideration, or I'm not even certain if a program like that would come under council consideration. I don't know, City Manager, would you care to weigh in on that type of a process, and if that might be something that we could.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I really don't have too much to add. I think the chief really addressed it succinctly. It's certainly a well-honed tool that's used across the country. I sent you guys a link to the Fort Collins really fully fleshed out academy, which I think, as the chief has said, is probably a little beyond our means right now. But this notion of phasing in that he discussed with me following the working group, I think has a lot of merit, and the notion of auditing as well. If the council do want to explore that kind of implementation more fully, it's certainly something that we could put pen to paper on and try to sketch out like what the cost of a full-blown program might be, or we could also take the chief's direction and look at phasing in topics of interest. We know that topics they tend to there tend to be certain topics that rise to the top, right, that we hear a lot of community interest and involvement in, and those cycle through at times as well. So we could take that kind of approach as well and try to give you some estimates of the cost to support that, because of course it leans heavily on our LPD staff to support those efforts.
I appreciate that. I think that that perspective is good for the council to have. And I do think there's some points there. The chief raised this issue of putting it out there for people that might be interested in auditing those processes, and I think there's some merit to that. It would be more of an open end for those people that are interested, as opposed to setting up a program around what seems to be areas of interest and then waiting to see if anybody does it. I don't know. To me, this seems like something that probably needs a little bit more discussion and some comparison of different ways to move forward with it. It doesn't mean we won't do it. It just, I'm not sure where we're at with it at the moment. All right, other parts of the recommendations that people want to dig in deeper on. I'm going to council on that first. Of course, we'll have a process, council members, of adopting recommendations or not, like we have from other ad hoc committees, which city manager, if memory serves, that's done by resolution, and the council at that time will choose to adopt or not adopt the recommendation list, and that'll be probably the next step in this. But for now, let's see if there's any more questions about the recommendations. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. I had a question about recommendation number 4. Is this envisioned to be an ongoing group? Are we forming like what would equate to a new city commission that just has this cross section of our residents as its membership, that is directed at this this idea of sort of increasing the sort of communication with the police department? Is that the idea, or are we talking about a group similar to the working group that meets under a constrained ad hoc variety of meetings and provides recommendations to the police department to move forward, or city manager's office, or whatever the case may be?
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. In my mind, it was closer to the former than the latter. And I would ask for the co-chairs or other members of the ad hoc committee to maybe address a little bit more of that question, because my interpretation of it was that, and it got support for me to that interpretation. I don't want that to be the only answer. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Cushman.
Yeah, I think that we left that kind of blanked for a purpose. There was some discussion during the course of that had to do with whether it should be separated completely. And if that's the case, then those complaints that we were talking about earlier, this might be a landing place for them. The other part was that if it was more of a closer contact with the police department itself, like as part of some type of city subgroup, like the working group, then I think that would be a more longer term deal that they would probably keep that committee going and then just replace the members on a 2-year basis or something like that. So it really is going to be up to you as city council people to see which one works best for Laramie and what you want to do with it. But that was certainly one of the parameters that we just wanted to make sure that was there, so that the city police department can take information and recommendations from them, as well as they, as the police department, can go ahead and give that to them, and they can spread out information to the city. And that's just another transparency thing that I think we wanted to make sure that was available.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Cushman, was it envisioned, it doesn't say in the recommendation, but was it envisioned to have law enforcement on this as well, or is it intentionally left without any law enforcement representation?
I think that this was left intentionally without law enforcement representation because we think that there would probably be a liaison that, or a particular person that this group would be talking to as a liaison to the police department. At least that's what I envisioned during the conversation. Tracy, do you remember anything specifically different on that?
Mitch, I do not. I am in agreement with you.
Okay, and so I think that that was kind of the idea of it, was that it was going to be a separate way that the community would have a diverse group of people from different backgrounds that would certainly be able to spread information into the police department and spread it out as it comes out to make sure that everyone's aware of it. That's all.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councilor Harrington. Chief Stelter, I saw that you'd raised a hand.
Mayor and Council, my recollection with this through the ad hoc committee was that there was a vision of the ad hoc committee to develop and create a program similar to what Cheyenne Police Department has, which is called PACT, which is the police and community together, which certainly would involve both community members and the police department integrally. But when I thought about this, I thought and had a discussion with the city manager about how deeply involved the Laramie Police Department is across the community, whether it's our sexual assault response team, our CARES team at the university, our CARES team at LCCC, our work on the child protection team. We're already embedded with the community in so many different ways, and those are just a few of them, but that was my recollection, and it absolutely discussed some type of a community police partnership that dealt with how we interact with our communities, and frankly, it was just like a little precursor of a community oversight board. So that was the recollection that I had from the ad hoc group, and where the ad hoc recommendation came for that similar to the PACT team over in Cheyenne. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Stelter. Are there any other city manager? I'll go to you, and while the city manager is sharing with us, I'd ask if there are any other members of the ad hoc committee that want to share their interpretations of where we were trying to go with this recommendation, what their interpretation of this recommendation was. Now would be a good chance to share those views with the council, but we'll start with the city manager.
Mayor, I just wanted to remind not just you guys, but also the members of the public. You do have an archive on the city website of minutes, or what we called group memory, of the discussions that ensued at the working group meeting. And so if you go to their section of the website, and I was just reviewing it as we were talking about it, there is some good information that would give you context. And it sounds to me from your questions like that's what you're looking for, is just additional context to the discussions that occurred there. If you'd like, I'll email you that link so it's handy in the inbox. But it is archived there for everybody.
Thank you, City Manager, and I think that's a good point to raise. The only other thing I'd add to that is that sometimes people want that opportunity to kind of summarize for themselves, if they'd been on the ad hoc committee, what their view about it was. like to go to Councilmember O'Doherty, and then I'll go back to Councilmember Harrington.
Oh, he was first. I keep hearing about what Cheyenne has, and I've looked it up many times, so I was hoping there'd be a direct link somewhere to this group that they have. So I'll look where city manager just directed us. Maybe it's in the minutes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I went to you because we'd already heard from Councilmember Harrington once, but we'd like to go to Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the second go round here.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just mentioned that as why I'm trying to go in order. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so I have two sort of thoughts at the, I don't know if this is the end of the discussion, but just for a second time, two thoughts on this piece. One, I think it does address Section 3 of Resolution 2020-38, which was the section to increase positive interaction between LPD and members of the public. I think if that is the direction, that's the aim, then I do think having law enforcement on this group, if it's public facing in that way, I think that makes a lot of sense. If it's to serve as the report, like the depository for the complaint process and things like that, then I'm not sure it would make sense, in my opinion, to have law enforcement on that committee. So I could go either direction on that. We don't need to form two committees here necessarily. I do think a council member should participate in this and could potentially function as that in between if it's necessary to remove law enforcement from this. But if the intention is to address Section 3 of Resolution 2020-38, then I think it needs to have some representation from LPD, whether that be the chief or an officer of some, or even frankly the folks over there running their social media pages. It should have some representation, I think, if that's the intention. So, thanks, Mayor.
Okay. You bet. And I think what I'd add to that is to follow the city manager's advice, which is to look at the group memory around that recommendation, and look at what informed that. I think it was intended to address the interactions piece, but I think it was also intended to address a little bit of the question of greater transparency and understanding of processes as well. But I think that's still separate from your other question about being a repository for complaints. I don't necessarily know that was envisioned as part of it in our discussion. Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you. I would just like to offer support in regard to Councillor Harrington's comments throughout this discussion. And I think if we look at the recommendation, that it states to build a more effective partnership between the Laramie Police Department and the community. It really does not, in this recommendation, address complaints and a complaint avenue. And so I think my interpretation was the intention of this was to build partnership, and you cannot do that without partners. And the other comment I had regarding Councillor Harrington's comments was in the very beginning, Councillor Harrington, you started with, are you suggesting we develop a board or an ad hoc committee? And I thought that was very good, because that starts to move toward the formalization of this recommendation, and it starts to explore how we might formalize it. And in possibly forming a board, are we then acknowledging this is an important area for our city that needs to be addressed in an ongoing, sustainable way? So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. And I think, too, if you read through just the text of the recommendation, investigate the creation of a police and community committee to serve as a volunteer group to build a more effective partnership between LPD and the community, specifically looking at increasing transparency of the department's activities. Membership on the committee would include formerly incarcerated individuals and individuals from underserved or otherwise disadvantaged groups from within the city, and I think those are key aspects of this too. The city council should collect data to evaluate any program instituted under this recommendation. What that data would be, we would probably want to spell out the official creation of it, but I don't know that the ad hoc committee said this would be a place where we'd go through with a fine-tooth comb with this group of volunteers of complaints. Those kinds of things weren't drilled down on, but that issue of transparency was very much emphasized, and that issue of bringing in people that might not otherwise have input on these important topics was emphasized. So, just something to add. Yep, go ahead, Councilor Cumby, if you want to add on to that.
May I just say that transparency goes both ways, and that we want transparency with the police department, but then the department also needs transparency with the community and needs to know what the community's thinking and those opinions. So.
Right. Not so much that those opinions are concealed or unknown, but there needs to be a good constructive channel for that stuff so that it can meaningfully impact policy and procedure. I think that is one of the things that we talked about that we would hope to achieve with this group. Okay. Other questions on this number 4 or input? I think we got some hands up, so I'll go for public comment on this discussion around recommendation number 4. For Mr. Fonte, and let Andrew Fonte in. Go ahead, sir.
Well, my hand was up on a comment on a lady who was commenting before. I'm just going to say it real quick. I can guarantee you that the lady said about the services available for the present, to utilize, having a voice about what's going on and how certain people are treated for speaking out about these things and targeted and tracked. The fact of the case is you exhaust these sources a long time ago. We've witnessed this whole process for good or for bad. For 10 years, we've documented it. And so we know that the resources that are out there get exhausted for as simple as excuses of why they can't follow through or why they can't have some sort of help for the current situation. So just on that lady's comment, I just wanted to let her know that those sources do exhaust pretty quickly. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment, sticking with us throughout the meeting. Let's go to Melinda again and allow Melinda an opportunity to weigh in on this topic. Go right ahead, Ms. Reyes.
Yes, and that was me, I'm sure, that he was commenting on. So I just want to kind of reiterate about what Mr. Harrington said, and I think both of those directions are positive ones, whether with the police department involved or without is I think both are needed. But the fact that it says with incarcerated individuals, I mean, I would be the first to volunteer. So I did a year in the jail. But as I understand it, the sheriff's office runs the detention center, and I know that when I first started following ACOP, that they were looking into the treatment of the criminals or the people in there, and that there was racism going on, and that it was addressed. And that nothing was really done about it until recently, since Sheriff Applehans took over.
Okay, and you are correct about the operation of the detention center. All right, further input here on recommendation number 4? All right. Any other general comments about recommendations from the council? Councilmember Cumby?
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to look at recommendation 3, and kind of in the very beginning, the community calling for a civilian oversight board was an impetus, one of the impetus for the formation of this work group. And I just wanted to see if other members of the group could confer with me that we felt that as far as the civilian oversight board, that it was much more complex than something that we could accomplish within the group in our time frame. And what we are recommending is that we should consult with NACOL and continue to investigate different types of oversight boards and approaches to this community police interaction and collaboration that would also function under Wyoming state statute and the International City Managers Association. So the recommendation is that we continue to explore more and to get more information, that we felt that the ability for us to fully explore that topic within the time constraints of the work group, we were not able to do that. And so I just like to get comments from other members of the group. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Cumby, I think, is correct in terms of the frustration, in terms of the time that's needed to delve into a topic that complex. Certainly, as everybody can see from the vote, it was pretty closely divided on a yay-nay basis. And so the recommendation was to consult with NACOL. But I think I want to highlight also that could function under Wyoming state statute. There was a tremendous amount of discussion on the legality of any type of an oversight board functioning within Wyoming, both from the city's attorney as well as other attorneys that served on the working group. So I just want to underscore that would need, significantly more research and time spent on it, because the group certainly didn't come to any conclusions that we could operate that in Wyoming under Wyoming state statute as it sits.
Thank you. Mr. Cushman.
I just wanted to say that during the course of even that last meeting, our co-chair, Tracy Roslin, got a scholarship to go down to the brand new Nicole theories and applications. And she was actually on her way back and never got a chance to visit with the board about what she had learned while she was down there. And that's the most recent training on Nicole that anybody has. And that was one of the complaints, I think, is about the timing, was that if we had a little bit more time, we would have been at least been able to hear the newest part of that, and rather than the one that was about a year old, I think is what we heard. So that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments on this recommendation from council members or ad hoc committee members? And I do think those comments that you've heard are accurate about the group's discussion. All right. Don't see any. Still looking for sort of summary comments or questions here, and then we'll go for public comments along the same lines. We're at 8 o'clock. Councilmember Harrington.
Yeah, Mayor, I was curious if, because, I mean, we've heard several times about the length of the time constraint, I guess, of this working group being a problem. And I think we all had set a time frame with the idea that it would be helpful for the community to have this sort of time bound. But I'm curious if on recommendation 3, if there would be a component of that working group that would want to continue on in this discussion with the city manager. And if that would be something council would be interested in as well.
Councilmember Harrington, I think if that recommendation is adopted, it would have to follow something like what you described. Chief Stalwart.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I just want to add that, over the better portion of the last 2 years, the research I've done on citizen oversight has been extensive, and I think that council would be remiss if they limited their research or their inquiries into NACOL versus the NIJ and IACP, because there are a lot of people out there in the public safety community that have done extensive research on community oversight and the different concepts of community oversight. And I tried to present that to the ad hoc committee. And I think that council would be remiss if they didn't expand their research or consideration for community oversight or community input to institutions larger than just NACOL, which is a 501c3 that was developed 20 years ago specifically to look at community oversight, where NIJ and IACP and other public safety law enforcement organizations look at that as a matter of course. So I would just...
Chief, we lost you. We lost your volume.
Sorry, I would just add that there are many organizations, IACP and NIJ, that have looked at these issues over many, many years, and are valid research opportunities. Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. And I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you, but can you go ahead and give us those acronyms? I know one is the I think International Association of Chiefs of Police, but what is the other one?
Sorry, NIJ, which is the National Institutes of Justice, which did a lot of work and also collaborated with NACOL and IACP on a number of different research projects as recently as, I think, 2010 or 11. So there's a lot of research out there on citizen oversight that council should consider other than just NACOL, which is I mentioned that they're a 501c3 nonprofit, and that, at least in my research of citizen oversight, meant that they had a very targeted interest. So while I don't disregard their research, they're certainly targeted in what they want to see as outcomes.
Thank you, Chief. And I think council's got the point here is that there are other resources and expertise in the area. So if the council adopted that recommendation, it could be modified to include those other resources if that's the way the council goes. I think those are fair points. Mr. Cushman?
Yeah, I think that's important. That one of the things that we didn't have time to do is that we had time to hear what NACOL was about, but we didn't really have time to investigate to see how that works, or if it does work, and if that's the only place to go, and so that was also part of the lack of time that we had. I mean, we collected a lot of information, but that information wasn't critically looked at and critically questioned, and I think that's where you have some of your disagreement on that recommendation 3 was that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to recognize Dr. Kassir. Let's let Charles Kassir into the meeting and so he can talk to us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we talk about lack of time, but also part of it was just the fact that because it was such a large and diverse group, it was cumbersome, and so it was slow to inform everyone and discuss everything and make any kind of recommendation. So I think that basically going forward, you're going to need a more focused and more streamlined group of people who could probably, I don't know, if there's a way to meet in person, it just is a lot more effective and more efficient if you can do that. But if it has to continue with Zoom, that's okay too, I guess. But I think really digging into this and doing all this, I don't think any of us realized how complex this issue really was and how much variety of models there were. Well, most of us didn't know that anyway. So anyway, that's all I have to say. So to go forward with it, I would just make sure that you have a working group that's ready to work and that will be focused with a reasonably small number of people so they can actually move forward.
To the ad hoc committee's credit, I think there was an expectation that it would be complex, and it was as complex as anticipated, and then more so. I think is where we found ourselves. I appreciate those comments as well. All right. Let's get any other overall questions about recommendations, and I would like to close this out with remaining public comment on the overall recommendation list from any and all. Okay, let's see if we have public comment on the overall. Yeah, I'd like to recognize Mr. Herther from the ad hoc committee, Joe Herther. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ad hoc committee. And I guess with the ongoing work, I just want to kind of reiterate that we really need to be focused on that authentic relationship between the community and law enforcement. And so Nicole may have a certain point of view, but I think what we really are looking for is finding a way for us to have that kind of relationship built. And it can be an oversight committee, it can be other things. But I think that group should really be focused on how to create that authentic relationship with the community, hearing voices from the community who oftentimes don't have their voices heard, and finding a way to cultivate that. So sometimes I think we get lost in garnering that kind of relationship with the community. And I just want to reiterate that I think that's really one of the critical things this group should be working on, anything that moves forward.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you. Thank you for your work on the committee. All right. So for overall comments, we're open for public comment. I'd like to recognize Mr. Fonte for general comments on the whole topic. Go ahead, sir.
I appreciate all your words, Mayor and councils. I really appreciate what you all do for our community. And even I really want to say thank you to all those who are listening and all those who know what we're saying is true, and that there are some things that happen when you speak out against the fox and the bad hens. And I just want to say that when you do that, you do get targeted, and it's not anonymous. I've been called a terrorist for asking the same questions that we're talking about right today. I just asked them too early. I asked them years ago. So I understand what we're all doing, but I also want to put some perspective to it, because there's people that have spent 30 years of their life trying to do this and better the system and better it for children and better it for the elders and the veterans. And there's people that spend their whole lives doing this stuff. So I do appreciate all the hours that everybody has thrown into this. But just keep in mind that there are a lot of people out there, even right now, that they can't talk, they can't speak their words. For whatever reason, they're cornered, or they're too, don't have the money to come visit with you all night. And so let's take that moment and say to all you citizens who know that what we're dealing with from this group that's in charge right now, that's talking to you, that's giving you their advice, this group that's in charge, there's a reason why we're talking tonight, and it's their policies. Their policies are why we're talking, and they just don't work. And it's been 25 years in some of their policies, and they don't work. There's a lot of things that they do that are outstanding, and I'm not talking about that tonight. What I'm talking about are those who are the brunt of this conversation, those who are hurt, and they're sitting around doing, they're home right now, and they're hurting. There is poor people that are hurting all over this community right now for these topics that we're talking about. There are people that are stifled and can't move and feel completely behind bars sitting in their house because no one's listening to them. And so I just want to take this moment to tell you about them. And I also want you to know that when you do speak out, you're not anonymous. I know I said that, but reiteration is always a good thing. And in my final comment, maybe I just tell you real quick, this idea of a citizen, oversight, the only thing you got to worry is if your neighbor's a bad hunter. That's the only thing you got to worry about there. The other thing I ask to mention is that just to remind everybody that there are other people doing other things other than what you guys are doing right now to help better the community. We got an awesome group here and there and all around us. This is our community. We're all one in that sense. But yet there's a lot of other people doing things right now. So please don't demonize them. Please don't ostracize them and put them out just because their efforts aren't exactly the same lingo and the same words that everybody uses here on this Zoom thing. So the other thing too, just real quick, is how do you do anything on Zoom? I pity all you guys. I feel sorry for all you guys. God bless you all. Thank you for being Laramie, for the good and for the bad. And we're all just trying to make our space the best for our children. At least that's what I'm doing for sure. So appreciate everybody being here, and I'm going to sign off and listen to everybody else too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fonte. Your comments are welcome at the city council meetings. Do we have any other general public comment, just sort of on the overall set of recommendations? Yes, Linda Devine for that comment. Go ahead.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. And I echo what Mr. Fonto said as far as, really appreciating the work that's gone into this. Listening tonight, I think, I have a few observations and something that I'd expressed concern about before, which is having law enforcement so heavily involved in deciding on whether or not there should be an oversight board for their own agency. And I say this with, I respect the chief because we are on some different boards together. There's just some things that we disagree on. And so what I'm hearing tonight is we want a citizen academy where folks come in and get to see what the cops do and training and all of those things. But then we don't want a citizen volunteer board where law enforcement might be engaging more with what actual citizens might be doing. We don't want the city council to rely on this group to do some further investigation on Citizen Oversight Board because it might be too pointed towards the Citizen Oversight Board but we should look at an organization that is primarily a chief of police. And so it's concerning to me that there's such a large voice coming from law enforcement and recommending things to city council. And I would respectfully ask you to go with what the ad hoc committee voted on, which was for y'all to use this organization that they voted on to do more learning about the Citizen Oversight Board. Again, I appreciate your concerns and time.
Thank you very much for the comments and for everyone for your own investment of time. You know, the Zoom issue, it's funny. We get mixed reviews on that, as I've heard other government bodies have too. Some people like it because you can go to the meeting wherever you are. Some people don't like it because it's on the internet and you have to look at your computer screen. Some people like it because it helps with perhaps some safety issues. Some people don't like it because they think you've got to have in-person meetings. I'd say in between. The city as a whole, I think, is looking forward to getting into some in-person meetings. But I'll say this: I take my cues from those people that I trust with their evaluations of the public health situation for in-person meetings. I do think it's safe to say that the city government won't be meeting on Zoom from now until the end of time. That's all I'll say about it. I don't think that's our plan, but I won't say, "Yep, I'm not going to give you an exact date when you can meet with us in person." But I know there will be one. So we hear you on those Zoom calls, and we appreciate everybody making it work because I do think we end up doing an okay job with it. And that goes for everybody: committee members, council members, staff, members of the public. We appreciate you taking the time and engaging through a non-traditional format. Do we have any other overall topics here for comments? I don't think we had any from any more from attendees. I didn't see any hands up. Anybody else want to make sort of any kind of summary comments? Yeah, go ahead, Tracy Roslin. Thank you.
I had emailed the city clerk letting her know that I would like to make a public comment. And so if this is an appropriate time for that, I'd like to do that. This is aside from my official role as the co-chair. This is my comments as a citizen. There were, a couple of grievances that I had with the working group outside of the sheer size of it. And, we were recognized for the effort that we put in and the time that we put in. But there were certainly a number of members who didn't show up regularly and who did not do the preparation work for it. And so that inhibited our progress as well. But it also made it difficult to move through meaningful discussion because in my purview, it seemed that some of our members were there just to be obstructionist to the Civilian Oversight Board specifically. And, the other point that I wanted to mention, which Linda Devine kind of touched on, was this in our information that we were given was we were to avoid any semblance of a conflict of interest. And I found that a number of members on the board did present a conflict of interest, and those included, if this is supposed to be about the community and getting feedback from the community, I was left wondering why we had the chief of police on voting whether there should be oversight, why we had multiple city council members on, why we had the city manager and some of these other people in their official roles as opposed to community members only. There was additionally, we've talked about the time as well. I know that I had asked for the ability to come back to City Council to ask for more time for the working group, and I got the impression that that was unacceptable, that this was supposed to be over by the beginning of December, and that there was no flexibility, when in fact in 2021, when the resolution language was changed from 12 months to 6 months, I felt that there was assurance given from City Council that the working group could return and ask for additional time, but that didn't transpire. However, even though there was limited time and it was difficult to come to a consensus on some things, I think that this does give us the opportunity to move forward with a lot of these discussions while gathering more public feedback and input. The public input from the community forum certainly showed clear support for reforms, and our community is engaged and eager to see reforms that maybe the working group was not able to address because of those time constraints. Finally, just as far as my personal stance, I would urge you guys to utilize the recommendation 3, if it's adopted, to not just investigate COB, but really outline the structure of what an oversight entity in Laramie would look like. And following discussions, I think that it would be appropriate if we could really kind of merge recommendation 4 and number 6, and that's basically a citizen oversight board, some details aside. And in my perception, the only thing that it really leaves out is the review portion that I would like to see. And I think that that's it. But ideally, in my eyes, an oversight board would encompass the complaint process, be able to review policies and training, and provide advisory position for the police department with a purely made up of citizens. And I would support the membership that's outlined in recommendation 4 for that, with an exclusion of law enforcement officers on it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Let's see if there are any others before we close the work session. Before we close the work session, I do think something we have to address is where we move as a city council after this with regard to the recommendations. And we will need to bring those on and adopt them or adopt whichever recommendations we're going to or not. And I think the city council probably needs to make some choices about when they want to see those brought forward. City manager, is that something we need to address before we come out of this work session, is when we might bring these on for the process of adoption or not?
Mayor, as you know, you will be adopting goals for 2020, excuse me, on February 15th, so next week. You could include it as a part of that exercise, or you could have a separate work session if you feel like you need further discussion as a body or with the community, or take this not only to another work session, but to a subsequent meeting to vet out the working group 6 recommendations and determine where to go from there. So I think there's a couple of different pathways forward, and it'll be sort of at council's discretion. But your earliest opportunity would be a week from today.
Thank you, city manager. So council, I do think we need to figure out what our plan is and which of those options that the city manager presented we want to go with. So I'd like to get some feedback from you about that. Councilor Somerville, and then I'll go to the Vice Mayor. Councilor Somerville.
Thanks, Mayor. My 2 cents is I don't know that I'd want to include it with the goals in that same motion, but I'm comfortable bringing that forward to the next meeting or in 4 weeks, meeting after that, whatever the city manager would be okay with in terms of timing for any staff prep that they want to do. But I think it should maybe stand alone as its own item and resolution.
All right, Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Somerville. I think adding it to our goals would just could really throw a wrench into a swift moving meeting. And I think we just come forward with a resolution 2 weeks from next week, 3 weeks from now, and see how the ball bounces in terms of each one of the recommendations. I also think it's important that, and this is more on the comment side, but all council members need to have a real full and clear understanding of state statute and in terms of what we can and cannot do, really, police department. And so I would ask our city attorney to make it crystal clear, in terms of oversight and how oversight is defined, because as most of us should know, HR, anything related to human resources in our police department, absolutely off the table. And we need to know that and understand that very clearly, not from a council member, but from an attorney. So that's it for me.
And any thoughts about the timing of it? Beyond 3 weeks, would you want to bring that on a regular meeting, another work session, special meeting?
Well, I think we're gonna, it may be a special meeting. I think this is a pretty big topic, but I don't know. I mean, I think that's for us to maybe kind of think about and give you some feedback on. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with going one by one and voting pretty quickly on these, but other council members maybe feel a lot different and want to have more discussion. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Other council members with points about this? I agree with the suggestion that we don't want to add it to the policy goals, because those are all going to probably garner some discussion and potential feedback. And this topic, I think, should probably be standalone, because it's going to have its own level of discussion and comments and questions. And as the Vice Mayor said, we may want to make sure we've got adequate time to hear from staff about advice and guidance regarding the goals or the policy recommendations. So I think we'll not combine it. City manager is what I'm hearing. We'll not combine it with the rest of the council policy goals, and we'll set it aside for another meeting. That date not yet set, but I would suggest, based on what I've heard, that we'd probably want to see it in the next month. Council, am I saying anything that is incorrect? Okay. All right. Well, that gets us to a starting place, at least. All right. That, I think, gets us to the end of the portion of tonight's work session on that topic. And there'll be beyond adequate public notice given for when the council picks this back up for the discussion about the adoption of any recommendations within coming in the next month, 4 to 5 weeks. Let's see if there's public comment on non-agenda or non-work session related items. Public comment on non-work session related items. Doesn't look like we have any, council. So let's go to the city council for updates. If you have any. It's 8:30. You probably feel like it's 10:30, council members, but it's not. It's 8:30. Councilmember O'Doherty.
the Laramie, the Environmental Advisory Commission met on Thursday, and they talked about the carbon neutrality goals, and one of the things that we talked about is since the landfill shows is such a high, technically it's our highest emissions of greenhouse gases would be from the landfill. And so people are eager to get composting started, and we have composting at the landfill, but composting of food waste. And so one of the members put together a thing for citizens to be able to share their compost. Like if you have a compost and are willing to take a bucket now and then from your neighbor, they put together something called LaramieCompost.org. Not an official, it's just citizen thing right now, and it's a beautiful website, and it has lots of things about composting in Laramie. And there was something else I was supposed to bring up from this meeting, but I don't remember what it was, and trying to remember if anybody else was there that can help me remember. Never mind. I'll find out. It's in my notes that are downstairs. I'll tell you about that later. Thanks.
All right, Councilmember O'Doherty. Councilmember Harrington.
Thanks, Mayor. Real quick, the Laramie Public Art Coalition has received a grant. I believe it was ARPA funded, but a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a significant win for Laramie. It was a highly competitive grant, and I think it will go a long ways. It's able to support staff positions, so I think it's going to be significant for the Public Art Coalition expanding efforts and really increasing bandwidth. Just had that quick update for you. And then, I guess I have one more now that I'm thinking about it and occupying time. The Collective Impact Coalition, run through the United Way, is in the process right now of selecting chair positions, filling a chair position to help handle a turnover in sort of like staffing of the group itself. And I think there were some eager committee members, so hopefully it will continue with its efforts unfazed. So that is all I have for y'all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Other updates, comments? No? Yep, Councilmember Gabriel.
Mayor, I have updates, but they're not council related, so I'm going to pass tonight.
Okay. They're not city related? Okay. Councilmember Gabriel throwing me for a loop here. We always have updates, but they may not be council related. All right. Let's take a look. Council members, if nobody else has anything, I'd ask you to take a look at the agenda. It's a full agenda, but I think if you look through that agenda, the top end of the agenda, the earlier items don't appear to me to be items that the council is going to need a lot of discussion about, because there are things that they're either regular items or they're items that we're finishing up on or that we've talked about at length before. For instance, the engineering agreement for the Northside Tank project. We'll probably have some information about the purchase of the storage area network, a purchase agreement, and some other contract items. And then towards the end of the agenda, we have some items that might generate a little more discussion. Council members, if you weren't able to join us for the goal setting session, I would just ask that just please make sure you get a good chance to look through the council policy goals list, and make sure that everything on there you're aware of, and if you have questions about it, you're ready to go on it. And it's open for any other council input on the consent or regular agenda. Seeing none. We'll check and see if there's any other questions about agenda items. City Manager, if you could, for the council, get some dates together for us for when we look at future meetings, for when we're going to pick up tonight's topic again for consideration of the recommendations. If next week we could look at some possibilities for dates for that. I know you will.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll work with the clerk on that. I think that Council, your schedule is starting to get very full, as it always does this time of year, mid to late February and into March. So I suspect, just as a heads up to you, we'll be looking at a special meeting date. And over the last 5 to 6 months, it seems that Wednesday evenings seem to be prime nights for that. So watch maybe for some follow-up from the clerk to assess your availability.
Okay, thank you very much. City Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to point out to council that we did send out a survey recently. We received some replies back for March 2nd and March 9th. Given tonight's conversation and knowing that ward boundaries are coming back around as well, within a short time frame, we may need both nights for work session or special meetings. So just to kind of keep that on everyone's radar. If you can't make it, if you could let me know, that would be great.
Okay, so go back and check the city clerk's email for those Wednesday nights and see if those will work for you so we can get them scheduled. Thank you, City Clerk. Council members, anything else before we close the work session? Councilmember Gabriel?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to express my appreciation to the city manager for passing along the links as we go through all the discussions. I think they're very helpful, and even though it might seem like it's a pain for us to look through all this stuff, I think from my standpoint, I appreciate that. Thanks, Janine.
I appreciate knowing that. I worry that I'm being annoying, frankly.
No, it's very, very helpful because it allows for people to follow the discussion while you're getting those research materials. What I regret about it is that you have to go and look those up when you're probably also interested in following along with the rest of us, but we do appreciate it. It does help, and it brings them to the top so we can go back and look at them. Council members, I didn't think I had seen anything else, so why don't we close the work session and close our meeting this evening? Okay, thank you very much.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.